101. Latin.
In somnis veritas.
Translation, in dreams there is truth. 102. Latin.
In spe.
Translation, in hope. Notes, future, my mother-in-law.
In spe.
That is, my future mother-in-law, or in embryonic form, as in Locke's theory of government resembles
In spe.
Montesquieu's theory of the separation of powers.
注未来
My mother-in-law. In spe.
即我未来的岳母，或处于萌芽状态，如洛克的政府理论实际上类似于孟德斯鸠的权力分立理论的萌芽状态。
103. Latin.
In specialibus generalia quaerimus.
Translation, to seek the general in the specifics. Notes, that is, to understand the most general rules through the most detailed analysis.
注即通过最详细的分析，了解最普遍的规律。
104. Latin.
In statu nascendi.
Translation, in the state of being born. Notes, just as something is about to begin.
注就像某事要即将开始一样。
105. Latin.
In theatro ludus.
Translation, like a scene in a play. Notes, surreal.
注超现实主义。
106. Latin.
In toto.
Translation, in all. Notes, totally, entirely, completely. 107. Latin.
In triplo.
Translation, in triple. Notes, in triplicate.
注一式三份。
108. Latin.
In umbra, igitur, pugnabimus.
Translation, then we will fight in the shade. 109. Latin.
In utero.
Translation, in the womb. 110. Latin.
In utrumque paratus.
Translation, prepared for either event. 111. Latin.
In vacuo.
Translation, in a void. Notes, in a vacuum, isolated from other things.
注在真空中，与其他事物隔绝。
112. Latin.
In varietate concordia.
Translation, united in diversity. Notes, the motto of the European Union.
注欧盟的标语。
113. Latin.
In verbo tuo.
Translation, at your word. Notes, a reference to the response of Peter when he was invited by Jesus to put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch, Luke chapter 5 line 4.
注参考圣彼得在被耶稣邀请时的回应，把船开到水深之处，下网打鱼。路加福音第5章第4行。
114. Latin.
Invidiae prudentia victrix.
Translation. Prudence conquers jealousy. 115. Latin.
In vino veritas.
Translation, in wine there is truth. Notes, that is, wine loosens the tongue, referring to alcohol's disinhibitory effects.
注即酒使舌头放松，指酒精的抑制作用。
116. Latin.
In vitro.
Translation, in glass. Notes, an experimental or process methodology performed in a non-natural setting, for example, in a laboratory using a glass test tube or petri dish, and thus outside of a living organism or cell. Alternative experimental or process methodologies include in vitro, ex vivo, and in vivo.
注在非自然环境，例如在使用玻璃试管或培养皿的实验室中进行的实验或过程方法，因此在活的有机体或细胞之外。替代性的实验或过程方法包括 in vitro, ex vivo 和 in vivo。
117. Latin.
In vivo.
Translation, in life or in a living thing. Notes, an experiment or process performed on a living specimen.
注：在活体标本上进行的实验或过程。
118. Latin.
In vivo veritas.
Translation, in a living thing there is truth. Notes, an expression used by biologists to express the fact that laboratory findings from testing an organism in vitro are not always reflected when applied to an organism in vivo. A pun on in vino veritas.
注：生物学家用来表述以下事实的一种表达方式，即体外测试生物体的实验室结果在应用于体内生物体时并不能总是得到体现。in vino veritas 的双关语。
119. Latin.
Incepto ne desistam.
Translation, may I not shrink from my purpose. Notes, from Virgil, Aeneid, Book 1, are used by Juno, Queen of Heaven who hated the Trojans led by Aeneas. When she saw the fleet of Aeneas on its way to Italy, after the sack of Troy by the Greeks, she planned to scatter it by means of strong winds. In her determination to accomplish her task she cried out.
Incepto ne desistam.
注：出自维吉尔的《埃涅阿斯纪》第1卷，由天后朱诺所使用。他憎恨埃涅阿斯所领导的特洛伊人。在希腊人洗劫完特洛伊之后，当他看到埃涅阿斯的舰队前往意大利之时，他打算用强风将舰队吹散。为了表达他完成任务的决心，他大声喊道
Incepto ne desistam.
120. Latin.
Incertae sedis.
Translation, of uncertain position seat. Notes, a term used to classify a taxonomic group when its broader relationships are unknown or undefined.
注：当一个分类组的更广泛的关系未知或未定义时，用于对该分类组进行分类的术语。
121. Latin.
Incredibile dictu.
Translation, incredible to say. Notes, a variant on mirabile dictu.
注： mirabile dictu 的变体。
122. Latin.
Intus et incute.
Translation, inwardly, under the skin intimately, without reservation. Notes, Persius, Satire 3, line 30. 123. Latin.
Index librorum prohibitorum.
Translation, Index of prohibited or forbidden books. Notes, a list of books considered heretical by the Roman Catholic Church.
注：罗马天主教会认为是异端的书籍清单。
124. Latin.
Indigens Deo.
Translation, being in need of God, beggar before God. Notes, from Augustine, De Civitate Day 12.
Beatitudinem consequatur nec explit indigentiam suam.
Since it is not satisfied unless it be perfectly blessed.
注：出自希波的奥古斯丁的《上帝之城》第12卷。
Beatitudinem consequatur nec explit indigentiam suam.
除非得到完美的保佑，否则他不会满足。
125. Latin.
Indignor quandoque bonus dormitat omerus.
Translation, I too am annoyed whenever good Homer nods off. Notes, Horace, Ars Poetica line 358.
注：出自赫拉斯的诗意第358行。
126. Latin.
Indivisibiliter acquistare inseparabiliter.
Translation, indivisible and inseparable. Notes, motto of Austria-Hungary before it was divided and separated into independent states in 1918.
注：1918年奥匈帝国分裂为独立国家之前的格言。
127. Latin.
Infinitus est numerus stultorum.
Translation, infinite is the number of fools. 128. Latin.
Infirma mundi elegit des.
Translation, God chooses the weak of the world. Notes, the motto of Venerable Vital Justin Grandin, the Bishop of the St. Albert Diocese, which is now the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Edmonton.
注：圣艾伯特教区现为埃德蒙顿罗马天主教大教区的主教 Vital Justin Grandin 的座右铭。
129. Latin.
Infradignitatem.
Translation, beneath one's dignity. 130. Latin.
Ingenio stat sine morte decus.
Translation, the honors of genius are eternal. Notes, Propertius, Elegies Book 3, Elegy 2.
注：出自普罗佩提乌斯的挽歌集第3卷第2篇。
131. Latin.
Initium sapientia timor domini.
Translation, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Notes, a quotation of Psalm 111, line 10. Motto of the University of Aberdeen, Scotland.
注：引用自诗篇第111篇第10行，苏格兰阿伯丁大学的校训。
132. Latin.
Iniurie quia dideris contumeliam.
Translation, you who have added insult to injury. Notes, Phaedrus, Fables Book 5. 133. Latin.
Inopie disant multa, avaritia omnia.
Translation, to poverty many things are lacking, to avarice, everything. Notes, Publilius Cyrus.
注：出自普布里乌斯西鲁斯。
134. Latin.
Insita hominibus libidine alendi de industria rumores.
Translation, men have an innate desire to propagate rumors or reports. Notes, the motto of Titus Livius.
注：蒂托里维的座右铭。
135. Latin.
Instante mense.
Translation, in the present month. Notes, used in formal correspondence to refer to the current month, sometimes abbreviated as inst. For example, thank you for your letter of the 17th instant mens, see also.
Ultimo mense.
Last month.
Proximo mense.
Next month. 136. Latin.
Instrumentum regni.
Translation, instrument of government. Notes, used to express the exploitation of religion by state or ecclesiastical polity as a means of controlling the masses, or in particular to achieve political and mundane ends.
注：用于表达国家或教会政体的宗教式剥削，以此作为控制群众的手段，特别是为了达到政治的和世俗的目的。
137. Latin.
Instrumentum vocale.
Translation, instrument with voice. Notes, as Varro in his De Re Rustica, on agriculture, defines the slave, an instrument, as a simple plough, or etc., with voice.
注：正如瓦罗在他的 De Re Rustica 论农业中对奴隶的定义，一种有声音的工具，如简单的犁具等。
138. Latin.
Intaminatis fulget honoribus.
Translation, untarnished, she shines with honor. Notes, from Horace's Odes, Book 3 Ode 2 line 18. Motto of Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
注：摘自赫拉斯的颂歌集第3卷第2篇第18行，位于南卡罗来纳州斯巴达堡的沃福德学院的校训。
139. Latin.
Integer vitae scelerisque purus.
Translation, unimpaired by life and clean of wickedness. Notes, from Horace. Used as a funeral hymn.
注：来自赫拉斯，用作葬礼赞美诗。
140. Latin.
Intelligenti pauca.
Translation, few words suffice for him who understands. 141. Latin.
Interalia.
Translation, among other things. Notes, a term used in formal extract minutes to indicate that the minute quoted has been taken from a fuller record of other matters, or when alluding to the parent group after quoting a particular example.
注：正史摘录会议记录中使用的术语，表示引用的会议记录取自其他事项的更完整记录，或用于在引用特定事例后暗指其附祖时。
142. Latin.
Inter alios.
Translation, among others. Notes, often used to compress lists of parties to legal documents.
注：通常用于压缩法律文件的当事人列表。
143. Latin.
Inter arma enim silent leges.
Translation, in a time of war, the law falls silent. Notes, said by Cicero in Pro Milone as a protest against unchecked political mobs that had virtually seized control of Rome in the 60s and 50s BC. Famously quoted in the essay Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau as, "The clatter of arms drowns out the voice of the law." This phrase has also been jokingly translated as, "In a time of arms, the legs are silent."
注：西塞罗在 Pro Milone 中所说，这是对在公元前60和50年代几乎控制了罗马的那些失控的政治暴徒的抗议。在亨利·大卫·梭罗的《公民不服从》一文中，著名的引用是枪声淹没了法律的声音。这句话也被戏谑地译为
In a time of arms, the legs are silent.
144. Latin.
Inter caetera.
Translation, among others. Notes, title of a papal bull.
注：教宗诏书的名称。
145. Latin.
Inter mutanda constantia.
Translation, steadfast in the midst of change. Notes, motto for Rockwell College in Ireland and Francis Liberman Catholic High School in Ontario, Canada. 146. Latin.
Inter spem et metum.
Translation, between hope and fear. 147. Latin.
Inter faeces et urinam nascimur.
Translation, we are born between feces and urine. Notes, attributed to Saint Augustine.
注：被认为出自于希波的奥古斯丁。
148. Latin.
Inter vivos.
Translation, between the living. Notes, refers to property transfers between living persons, as opposed to a testamentary transfer upon death such as an inheritance, often relevant to tax laws.
注：指在世人之间的财产转移，而不是像继承这种的死后遗嘱转移，通常与税法有关。
149. Latin.
Intramuros.
Translation, within the walls. Notes, not public, source of the word intramural. See also, intramuros, Manila.
注：不公开 intramural 一词的来源，另见马尼拉市王城区。
150. Latin.
Intravires.
Translation, within the powers. Notes, within one's authority.
注：职权范围内。